Are you tired of guessing your way through supplements? Feeling like each choice is just another shot in the dark? Unlock your health potential at takeyoursupplements.com. Here, we don't just sell supplements, we customize wellness. Connect with a true health coach who tailors your nutritional path based on your unique health goals and challenges. From fatigue to vitality, from confusion to clarity. Start your transformation today. Visit takeyoursupplements.com and discover how feeling amazing is just one free consultation away. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 519. I am so excited for today's guest. We get to dive into such an interesting topic today with Dr. Laurie Marti. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a mutual friend, and that's how I discovered you. An amazing woman near and dear to my heart. Jessica does mental health counseling, but she looks at the body as a whole, very holistic mental health counseling, helping her clients to overcome addiction around anything you're addicted to. A lot of substance abuse, though. People who want to overcome substance abuse and alcohol come to her. But what I love is that she looks at the body as a whole and helps her clients as a whole. And that's, I'm sure, why she finds this topic so fascinating and why she told me that I really needed to interview you. Because although you come from a traditional medical doctor, allopathic background, you discovered that holistic medicine, functional holistic medicine, there's this whole world, amazing world of science-based ways of doing things that isn't just waiting for someone to get sick and giving them a drug. And I love that. I love it when MDs, they see the light and they're like, wait a second, this system is incomplete without seeing this whole other side of things. I definitely want to dive into all the fun stuff we're going to talk about today. But first I want to know, can you tell us, was there an aha moment as a medical doctor when you went, wait a second, have I been lied to? Like, was I lied to my entire time in university? Like, what was I, why is this whole other piece missing? Did you have like an aha moment?
I think I've had a few of them. There's never just one. So I graduated in family practice and started doing that for my first few years of my career. And I was actually home with my first child and on maternity leave. And I was just like, I don't even know if I'd been practicing for 3 years at that time. And I just said, I almost don't want to go back, but I have all this student loan debt. So I know I have to go back, but I'm not really happy in what I'm doing. One of the things that really bothered me was just within the medical practice that I had 3 partners, and I was obviously the new young partner. And I always got the most difficult patients because that's where they end up going, is to the new person in the practice. I would order a lot of blood work on them because I'm like, I don't know how to help you if I don't know what's really going on with you. And I would actually get chastised by my partners, by ordering so many tests. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to figure out what's going on with them? Well, fast forward to me on maternity leave. And there was a company that was looking for a practitioner that wanted to specialize in fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And it was sort of this moment where I was like, wow, that's an interest I've had since my residency, because my residency senior project was on a fibromyalgia patient. And so I basically, during that time off, I interviewed with them, and during that process, they introduced me to working with more holistic therapy because they had found that treating patients with fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition, really was amenable to a more holistic approach. And I had never been introduced to any of that. And it just sort of opened up this whole new world to me. Long story short, I ended up quitting my practice in family medicine and working for that for a couple of years, and then just wanted to go out on my own and start my own practice, and it really expounded from there because I didn't want to be restricted to just working with those type of patients. I felt like the information that I was learning, because I was just exploring all these different areas, and it was all like so new and so fascinating, and it's kind of like being reborn and realizing that there was this side of medicine that I mean, I had known about naturopathic doctors, but I didn't really understand what they did. And so it was just this, by being able to incorporate all of that into the allopathic realm and having this all-encompassing view of every patient was just an amazing experience. And so I opened up my own practice, almost it was 2007. So, and I have not looked back, and I've just learned more and more as I've gone along.
So you've been diving into the holistic space, and how does an MD like learn all the holistic stuff? Did you go through obviously you do your own reading, but do you go through functional medicine? Do you take those courses, or do you pick the brains of naturopaths? Like how do you get this training for those who are listening who are medical doctors who are like, I want to know more, I want to dive deeper, because the one thing that shocked me, and I've interviewed so many MDs who've become holistic, but the medical doctor training is designed to make you see people through the lens of medicine of reductionism. So you're looking to reduce people into their parts, right? And that's part of MD medicine. And being a diagnostician, MDs are amazing. The problem is then the tools they're given is like, here's all these drugs, right? and so it's just it's an incomplete view of the body. And so many MDs that have come on my show said that they thought their education was complete because the way their education has been presented to them and how much money and time they had to invest in their education, that what they had been taught was the most important aspects, and everything else was kind of like just second class, like secondary. And that functional stuff over there is not as important, or really, it's kind of like poo-pooed because, listen, if you graduated from Harvard, like, which I had interviewed a woman graduating from Harvard Medical, she said they made us believe that we were taught the most important things. So we are trained to poo-poo everything else.
Yes.
And then MD drug-based medicine had no answers for her when she fell ill. And she had to turn to holistic medicine, which then gave her life back. And then she had this massive, it was like being pulled out of the matrix. She had this massive wake up, and she's like, oh my gosh,
yes,
there's this whole other aspect. So in realizing as an MD being pulled out of the MD matrix and realizing there's this whole other world you want to plug into, but there's not like official, unless you went back to college and went back and got like a naturopathic degree. How do you navigate in the world to gain to piece together all the information you need so that you can really help clients on a holistic level? So how do you do that?
That's a great question. There's a whole industry built around that now. And one of them is called A4M. It's basically a regenerative medical group, which they have participants from and I would say members, because it's a membership organization, but they actually put on seminars where you pay a fee and you just go and you do classes from experts in different areas of different fields, and you can learn as much as you want. And I did that at the beginning because I had obviously so much to learn, but I tended to focus on hormonal therapy. So I had you can tailor your practice to what interests you. And I think I always had an interest in hormonal medicine, and then obviously these sort of chronic conditions where they were very underserved in the allopathic community. And I really felt like there was something lacking for patients that had been diagnosed with these conditions that were considered, when nothing else was found to be wrong with them, it had to be in their head, it had to be
Mm-hmm.
psychological. And that probably bothered me the most. And so, yes, I just spent a lot of hours doing formal training. You can get advanced degrees in that, but it really isn't necessary because it's really just about the knowledge. It's not like you absolutely have to have those sort of certificates on your wall. You just have to have an interest in it, and you have to put the time in to learn it, because that's the most important aspect is understanding that there's different roads in any field, and how you get there is you can make that your own, and so you just need the background information. But yes, it's good to know that there's this growing interest in MDs learning this other side of medicine. And I was surrounded by plenty of other MDs who were in my similar space. So it's a lot different than it was back in 2007. This is definitely a growing area, and I think the more that we have pandemics and things like that, you're just going to see this grow more and more because, for example, long COVID is sort of it's almost chronic fatigue syndrome that I've been dealing with years. But when you have these things come to the forefront in allopathic medicine, it's nice having that background because you realize that it's the same underlying processes are there. And so you can take that knowledge that you've learned, even though it's something new that you might be exposed to, all that baseline information is there.
What's really interesting is part of this movement was ignited by Dr. Oz. And I think that's so funny, like looking back, because I can think back to like Oprah and how she would bring things to the table to discuss, like menopause. And before she had that first episode talking about menopause as she was going through it herself, it was not, you didn't talk about it. It was a hidden like backdoor conversation with your doctor, and it was almost shameful to bring up, and she brought it into the light and brought Dr. Oz on, and then he had his own show. And as they explored just even just iceberg, right? Just tip of the iceberg conversations about things that were outside of the allopathic realm, little holistic nuggets here and there. Their patients would go to their doctors saying, "Oh, I want you to run this test. I want you to look for this." And the doctors didn't have any training in that. And patients, because in America, you can choose your doctors, you can shop for your doctor. In socialized medicine, it's a little harder. But here, you can go shop for your doctor. And so you can fire your doctor. And if they don't have the extra training, you can fire them and go get a new one. And so all of a sudden there was this need for medical doctors to go get additional training, go get some functional medicine training, start to understand what's going on, because it's now in the mainstream. It was now being talked about. And so I just loved watching that movement take off. We still have a long way to go. I'd like to see functional medicine be taught in medical school, but then that would be helping the patient get so healthy where they would need drugs, and that would cut the profits of big pharma. So
Yeah, there is definitely a strong push with the pharmaceutical industry and in training. So yes, I don't think that's something that's going to be introduced anytime soon.
which is a telltale sign that we need to think critically when we choose the companies we buy food from, the companies we buy medicine from, the companies we buy supplements from, and the doctors we choose to see. We need to not just blindly trust authority. We can't walk around in fear either, right? But just
Yes.
we need to take a step back and make sure that we're choosing the people who have the best training, and also the companies who have our best interest at heart, and not just profits, right? So I love that allopathic drug based emergency medicine is available for us to save our lives should we need it, God forbid, right?
Hmm.
And you don't, it's like taking your car to a plumber. If you take a chronic disease to an
Yes.
MD who only has training in drug-based medicine, because they don't have the training to see how we can help the body heal itself. So that's my soapbox. I say it every day, but you live it every day as an allopathically trained MD who
Yes.
now specializes in functional medicine, which is so exciting. So let's talk more
Yeah.
about the work you do. You started out, like, you talked about fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, and there's like Lyme disease, and that
Yes.
whole rigmarole of where you say we've been underserved. So true. And then,
Hmm.
of course, the hormones, but it all kind of like comes down to, if we chunk down and we look at like cellular health and we look at brain health, there's stuff going on. We look at liver health, there's genetics and epigenetics. um when you look at all of these different syndromes and the diagnoses, and you look at the body and how the body's functioning, what's going on that's disrupting the function of the body so it presents these symptoms?
Well, that's a big question because there are so many things that can cause dysfunction in the body, and it's not always really clear from the initial assessment of an individual. But that's where my biggest mantra is each person is an individual, and what makes us unique is our DNA. And so at the very core of us, we have a genetic makeup that gives us strengths and weaknesses. And then from that, we have our life experiences and our exposures, whether that be, toxic exposures. And I think most of us would agree that probably the last few decades, we've been exposed to more toxins than ever before in the things that we eat and the things that we breathe. Thank goodness more and more people are starting to read labels and starting to think critically about the things they put in their body. But our DNA puts us at that part of us that we don't know what our weaknesses and strengths are. And so that's really where it begins. And then based upon your exposures in life, stresses, the things that just happen because of life, as we get older, we become less resilient. And so I think as you go through your decades of life, there are different things that become apparent as problematic, whether that be hormonal things or pain or fatigue. These things can happen at any age. But then obviously as we get older, then there's these different facets of just our life with our hormone changes and things like that make us more vulnerable to the deficits that we may have that we don't even know about. Health is sort of a journey, right? We don't really think about our health until it's not working right. and then we try to ask someone to help us figure it out. And I think that then sets a person into looking, are they satisfied with the answers that they have, or do they feel like they have more questions? And that's when people will seek out a more thorough investigation. And I think that more and more people are becoming aware that there's other practitioners out there that they can help figure out, what's going to give them their healthiest experience. And I think it's just an all-encompassing world. And when you think about what happens in our life in terms of what we consider good health and bad health and disease and pathology, I think people have to they have to get to a point where they feel like they need to ask for help. And I think that that's, really the start is, when do you start asking help or asking those questions?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point, because what popped into my mind is my mom, who was like the epitome of health to me. She worked out 7 days a week. She took her supplements. She was meticulous with her diet. She'd cheat once in a while, like she'd eat red jujubes, and she knew red dye wasn't good for her, but she just kind of had, and it wasn't like she overdid it anyway. She'd have like 3 red jujubes, like, and that was her little guilty pleasure. She had some alcohol, like 1 or 2 servings a few times a week kind of thing. And so she had her little like guilty pleasures, but she felt like she made up for it by like how strict she was with her diet. Like she followed the diet plan that her naturopath gave her to, just meticulously, and had the discipline to exercise. But she ignored these little symptoms that came up. She ignored kind of this, a little digestive feeling here, little tired there, little like kind of funny feeling near her liver. And she chalked it up to the fact that they moved to Naples, Florida. They just, they'd gone through the stress of moving. She was acclimating to a new climate, eating different food, making new friends, doing different activities. And she just kind of pushed it off to the side until she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer.
Yes.
And a few months later, she died. And it was just, at what point did she ignored the symptoms because she was healthier than most, so those symptoms weren't, maybe if she was not healthy, maybe if she was like ate junk food every day and just really didn't take care of herself, she would have noticed sooner. But she ignored those symptoms. And so at what point are you a hypochondriac? At what point are you making a smart move by getting checked out because you feel those symptoms, right? So for her, it wasn't a big deal until all of a sudden it was.
Yes.
And my dad, on the other hand, largely ignored major red flags for heart disease and died suddenly of heart failure. So, like there's that blatant, like, I'm going to ignore major red flags. But then there's those little, sometimes the body is speaking in whispers. So at what point do you go, you know what, this isn't optimal health. I should probably look into how I could optimize this. So is it, I'm a little tired in the morning? Is it a little bit brain fog? Is it like I notice I can't do as well in the gym? I had a friend, we were part of a coaching program. He was an amazing coach. And he was doing, he had been a chronic smoker his whole life. And then he quit and did Ironmans. And his coach noticed that his times on his running were getting worse. And that's the only symptom he had of lung cancer. And he ended up overcoming the lung cancer, lived for many, many years, died in his very, very elderly, I don't remember if he was in his 80s, but he lived a full life. But that was his only symptom. So sometimes and luckily he caught it early enough. But sometimes when do we listen and go, I want to optimize that? And on the other hand, we've been told our whole life, oh, you have that because you're a woman. You have that because your mom had that. You have that because you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s. You have that because you're black or you're white or what, like we're just told these ridiculous things, these lies by our doctor that you're fat because your family was fat, or you have diabetes because your family has diabetes, or you have glaucoma just because that's what happens when you're 70. Like they're blatant lies. This is why, again, I kind of get on my soapbox with MDs that tell their patients, you're just going to have to be sick because this is how it is. It's not true at all. Your genetics don't dictate your future. They help educate us on where it might go but it has to accompany your lifestyle, right? So we look at the patient who has been told they're a certain way their whole life, or maybe they just believe it because their mom or their grandma said this is just how it is. Oh, everyone, or even the mainstream media, all women have period cramps. Like these lies. You could, if you were in absolute perfect health, you would notice no difference. You would just all of a sudden be like, oh, I got my period today. There would be no PMS. PMS is a sign that things are out of balance and we should be listening. So I'd love for you to share, what symptoms do you want people to listen to and take seriously and know that they can optimize those at any age?
Well, I think that is absolutely critical. And unfortunately, the exposures that we have in our medical community is that you don't really ask those questions. So when
Mm.
you're a teenager, you may go in for a sports physical. You're not really encouraged to expound on anything, right? It's a form you check off. And what child is going to, admit anything's wrong? But that's where we have to change the paradigm, even if it's only among, not going to the doctor, even if it's among, the population, that we begin to, our health is something that should be a topic of conversation. And I think it's never too early to say, you know what, maybe I should do a comprehensive stool test to figure out how my digestion is. Because who doesn't have a bloated belly every now and then, or react in some funky way to something they ate, and I'm not talking about food poisoning. I'm just talking about, gosh, that did not agree with me. And it's something I've eaten before. But just having that awareness that if something happens that is, not a completely random event, but it keeps happening, that's when you have to do something about it. For example, I will meet, normally most of my patients are adults, but I will end up seeing their teenagers or their children only because, they're like, well, maybe, they've kind of had some random things happen and maybe it's not right. And most of the time we blow off young people's symptoms because, well, they're young and they should be healthy. Well, come to find out, a lot of things that teenagers suffer with, acne, just food sensitivities, those things are not normal. However, we've begun to normalize that. And that's the problem, is that when you start normalizing those kind of symptoms or signs, things that you see and experience, that's when you have to start saying, this is not normal. And maybe there is something I should look deeper. And so it doesn't have to be I'm, passing out or I have some real severe symptoms or something like that. It can be just what we consider normal, everyday teenager issues or things in our life that we just think are normal for our age. But if you just have something that is just happening over and over, maybe don't just consider it normal, and maybe it is something underneath. And I've done testing on, over 1,000 patients, and I can tell you that nobody's normal. Nobody has completely normal tests. It's just I've checked my own tests and they're not, normal. So, it's all in how you just take that next step and say, I'm not going to accept this is the way that I exist. And if I can improve upon anything, maybe it gives me a longer life, or maybe I'll have more energy, or, so it's just about sort of not normalizing everything and having those conversations with your friends and family and your connections.
One of my naturopathic mentors told me about his favorite movie of all time, King of Hearts, 1966, in which during the war, this whole town is emptied out and the psychiatric patients in this asylum escape, and they flood down into the town and they take over the town. All the people are for a better lack of a better term, crazy, right? They're having a lot of fun, and they take over the bakery and the restaurant and the inn and everything. And then a soldier comes in, and can you imagine, you walk in and everyone feels as if they're normal, right? Because they're all there, but they're acting as if they've taken on these roles. And he walks into this world thinking that they're all townspeople. And he described the reason why this is his favorite movie, because he goes, this is what it's like to be a patient in the MD medical system. Everyone's in agreement. They're all crazy and they're all in agreement with each other.
Yeah.
And so you have to get, like, we're the outsider coming into this world, and we've been told this is just how it is. Like acne in children is normal. Right. And it's not. It is not. It's a sign of first of all, we got to look at blood sugar. We've got to
Mm-hmm.
look at the gut biome. We got this list of things we got to look at, and like food sensitivities, and but go even beyond. Why is there a food sensitivity? What's going on? Is there leaky gut? Like go deeper, right?
Yes.
And so we have taken a population, got them incredibly sick, and then said your sickness, because so many people have sickness,
Mm-hmm.
it's normal.
Right.
And the
Yes.
very first step in healing is to shift our mindset and pull
Mm-hmm.
ourselves out of the matrix of the brainwashed way we've been taught to think. And
Yes.
we have absolutely been taught to think this way because, and I hate acting like a conspiracy person with my tinfoil hat, but I'm making tinfoil hats for everyone, so passing them out right now. When you look at the history of the modern medical system, it was completely 100% orchestrated and influenced by those that sold pharmaceuticals at the time over 100 years ago. And it has since been not a days gone by that the pharmaceutical industry has not had control over the education of medical doctors, and the number one sponsor of all media are the pharmaceutical industry, so which is petroleum based. That's a whole fun rabbit hole to go down of true history, not like not a perceived conspiracy, but a real conspiracy. Real conspiracy is when someone or a group of people get together to conspire to do illicit things or to do things that aren't ethical or aren't right. And this is absolutely not right because they control the media that you've been bringing into your brain since you were born,
Yes.
and also your parents, but your grandparents or great grandparents, they were before this, and they might have they might have had a garden with herbs. They might have known that
Yes.
twice a year to do, like, if they had animals, they did a regular deworming of the animals, and then they took the same herbs as well. This is something that's been lost, but it was 100 years ago. Plus, we had a lot of things that we knew to do. Now we also did a lot of really weird stuff, like eat things with lead in it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
paint our body with arsenic or whatever, like weird. We had weird things we had. So at least we've gotten rid of a lot of the not so healthy things. But if we go back, we see that our ancestors incorporated nature into their medicine.
Well, there was less of a dependence on a system.
Yeah.
And and again, there's probably multiple theories on, what's behind it, but the idea is that we become more inclined to be part of this dependency of people taking care of us. Like we don't take care of ourselves anymore. But I think that's starting to change. See, I really do feel like there are more and more people asking questions, which is where it starts, right? It
Yes.
starts by being inquisitive, because I think we have been sort of told to obey and don't ask questions and just do what you're told, and but I think people are starting to say, we can follow the rules, but maybe we ask questions along the way. And I think our health, really it goes beyond even health in that realm, right? But it's about people just using these really big brains that we have and not accepting status quos.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we become a society that's sicker, we sort of dig ourselves into deeper holes. And I think people they're finally starting to wake up and say, maybe there is an alternative way. Maybe that we start being more self-sustaining, that we don't ask for help, or depend on organizations to help us, use those resources when you need them, but also realize that we have a responsibility to ourselves and our families to make sure that we're in the best health possible. And in doing that, it does require some work. It requires you to do some research, to think outside the box, because you're not going to get that if you just go to your doctor's office. You're not going to get that. So it's about people having a different mindset and saying, I'm just going to start asking different people different questions, and maybe I start learning some new things and some ways that I can help myself and meet the right practitioners that are going to help me in this journey of empowering myself. And that process is really powerful. It really teaches you not only how to take care of yourself better, but how to take care of others better, and just a community spirit in that, because I think our health is about community too. We need to heal ourselves, but in the process of just eating better and, sourcing out better foods and things like that, we are making those connections that can all help us be healthier.
And it does matter the environment, because if I've had clients before where they're the only one eating healthy and everyone else is going to Sonics or going to Starbucks and Sonics and Jack in the Box and McDonald's, and they're all kind of laughing at her, wanting to go to bed early and get up early to go for her walks or make her smoothies and all the changes she's making, versus the clients have had where the whole family's doing it with her, or 100% on board, or their husband's like, yeah, make me a smoothie too. And there's so it's so much easier when the people around you are on the journey with you, or at least supportive of your journey,
Yes.
and not questioning you or putting you down. Or, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many clients I've had that choose to cut out dairy, and then someone in the family is like, you need dairy and you're going to hurt yourself if you don't. And they get really indignant and like angry at them because they think that they're going to die if they don't eat dairy. And then they literally in the same day go through the drive-through and eat fried food. And like,
Yes.
that's okay. But like, how dare you not drink
Right.
the mammalian excretions of another animal? Like, it's just,
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
we need to like respect and honor our friends and family when they're trying to make health choices. But what I explain to my clients is that when people get upset, like especially those who are close to you, when they get upset about your changing, it's just holding a mirror up to themselves, and it's like
Yes.
they don't want to change. Like, and usually people with addiction also get very angry because they don't want to give up their sugar and their alcohol or whatever they're addicted to. And so if you choose to give those things up, if they don't want to make changes, they get angry at you for making changes because they don't want to feel threatened. And it's really interesting to make a health change and declare it to your friends and family, and then just watch and see who's supportive and then who isn't, and get that it's their stuff. But we have to kind of set ourselves up and make sure we have our healthy boundaries in place, because it's really interesting who comes out of the woodwork to sabotage us. And it's their stuff, but still we need to protect ourselves. You Earlier, you talked about how nutrient deficiency and toxic exposures are largely on the rise, right? And that's something
Mm-hmm.
we've seen in the last 40 years create chronic illness. And then there's this whole aspect of genetics, which you love to get into. And I'm really, really interested to talk about MTHFR,
Yes.
and which is just one of the many genetic things that we could talk about. But I'd love for you to explain from your standpoint as a physician working with a patient or client, what is the difference between someone's genetics and someone's epigenetics when it comes to helping them support their body's ability to heal itself and create optimal health?
The very first thing I do with any person that first comes to see me is I get an assessment of their environment, because you can find out all you want about their genetics, but if their environment is in a negative space, you will find that their genetics aren't, even if they have strong points, are not necessarily going to work for their benefit. So that concept of epigenetics is that, you have certain genes and gene mutations that we're born with, but these exposures, and either good or bad, will affect the expression of those genes. And so that's what's really amazing about this whole idea, is that people have for so long said, well, I have this genetic problem or this genetic predisposition, so I guess I'm going to die of this, or it's, my parents had this and now I'm getting it, so there's nothing I can really do to change it. Well, we've realized that's not the case, that there are factors that can improve upon these weak areas in our genetics, and we can make them function better. And in that process, people learn that they aren't subject to the outcomes that gene or that group of genes might cause for them disease wise, if they pay attention and they take care of their nutrition in a way that optimizes those. So the way that a lot of these genes work is, even if you have a mutation in an enzyme, you can take nutritional cofactors that can improve upon the function of that enzyme. And if you do that, then you reduce the risk of the potential outcomes of that mutation. And so you had mentioned MTHFR. That's actually the gene that got me interested in genetics, because I had read this research paper about fibromyalgia and how this chronic pain condition was affected by this gene, which I know I had heard about in medical school, but it was nothing that was a big topic of discussion. So it was something that I was familiar with, but didn't really know anything about. And that definitely led me down the rabbit hole of just understanding that particular gene. But then, of course, there's a whole host of others that can affect it. Just in this process of learning how we can understand what our genetic makeup is, but we can improve upon it based upon different factors that we can support. I think there's just a huge educational piece in this, because people are learning this stuff or hearing about it for the first time. And it's a pretty heavy science oriented. You can really get into the weeds in it. And part of my job is to bring it down to a level that I think people can utilize that information and apply it in their own lives. Take that information and do something positive with it. And then what I do is I support that with blood work and looking to see, to show people that they're making a difference. The choices that they're making, both with their lifestyle and with their choices in what they eat and the supplements that they take, they can see in black and white how these things are changing within their body, from their blood work. And that really encourages people.
Can you give us some examples?
Are you talking about a specific blood test or what?
Which, when you've worked with a specific client, obviously don't mention their name, but
yeah,
and that you saw these genetic things, and you saw how their gene expressions were expressing epigenetically.
Yes,
and then you supported them with the right cofactors, and then they themselves felt results, and you could also see those results on labs and also in their demeanor.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even say a specific one, but I would say, in general, I will see patients that don't sleep very well, or maybe they have, mood issues, depression or anxiety. And I will, identify that, they have certain gene mutations like MTHFR. And one of the things that we do is you want to promote the use of certain vitamins that are specific for supporting those enzymes. And what people start seeing is that, wow, I'm sleeping better. And then there are biomarkers, there's blood markers that you can check that actually start out abnormal when they haven't taken those supplements. And then they'll see over the course of 3 to 6 to 9 months that those numbers are coming down. They're also seeing that they're, maybe not as anxious. They're getting more energy. They're just their mood seems more stable. And it's a process, because what I found is that, a lot of people do these genetic tests now. They're not, talked to several people who have done them, and they'll find out they have a gene mutation. And there's plenty of information on the internet out there about them. Oh, take these B vitamins because they're going to help you. And what happens is, they don't know the dosing, or, they haven't really been instructed on how to take those things. And so they end up being very anxious, and they're like, well, this was the worst thing I ever did, was take these B vitamins. And I was supposed to take them because I have this gene mutation. Well, obviously these gene enzymes do not exist in a bubble. They are, there's other genes that affect, for example, MTHFR. So it's important to understand the supportive genes in that particular realm, because some people, like if they start taking B vitamins in a very high quantity, and I mean some of the dosages out there are quite high, and all of a sudden they are just really, really anxious. That's usually the biggest thing. They're, not getting any sleep, and their mind is racing, and it's just because that they don't know that there's other genes that are malfunctioning, that you've revved up a system that hasn't been very active, and now you've overactivated it. So there is a process with this where you don't want to just go at this without guidance. It's very, very important to understand how these genes influence each other, and that you have to really personalize it. And that's where, someone like myself, I mean, that's what I do, is I work with people to personalize their supplements, their treatments, so that they don't make those mistakes of feeling, like their mental health has really taken a nosedive because they started taking vitamins. And so this is the educational piece that I was talking about, because like I said, there's lots of testing that people can do without a doctor ordering it for them, but it's important to know the ramifications of taking certain treatments and supplements when you have these gene mutations.
I have MTHFR. I know there's different ones, and I don't remember the name of the one I have. But it's interesting because I have had liver problems that I have figured out. Certain things exacerbate my liver, and certain things really, really help. And when I take high levels of B vitamins, and this happens to my husband too, we both get very irritable and argumentative. So we typically we'll typically like dole out our supplements and take them together. And there was this, I mean, this was years ago, we were like sort of hitting the upper limits of B vitamin dosages. And the days that we did that, we were kind of at each other, which is not like, we will playfully bicker in a very loving way, but like we were kind of like just really irritable.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't like how I feel. Like I feel uncomfortable and irritable, and that's when I take very, very high dosages of B vitamins, which I don't anymore. And back then they weren't methylated, and that makes a big difference for me also. So there's that, when you're looking at, you can't just go to Trader Joe's and buy B vitamins or whatever. You can't just buy the whatever's off the shelf. It's not going to be the highest quality, the most bioavailable. It's not going to be in the right ratios, and it's definitely not going to be methylated. So there's just so many things. I remember way back in the day, 15 years ago, going to Trader Joe's and buying all my supplements because I believed in vitamins. Like I thought, oh, this is good for me. And it did not have a positive. It had a net negative effect, right? Yep. And so people will often try to save money. They'll like hunt around, like, oh, these vitamins over here at Walmart are cheaper. I'm like, well, you're actually wasting money, and not only you're wasting money, there's like a net negative because now they're actually hurting you. Whereas I really do believe in quality supplements and diet and looking at everything as a whole. But when we go to take our supplements, we really have to make sure, like, I think even less is more, like start at a low dose and slowly work your way up and find where you feel best. Because I did that, and I was like, wow, my dose was like 100-pound dose, like for, instead of doing like the full body weight dose. And some people, they just excel, right? And that like, or like even like a child's dose. I know a woman who does like doses almost the amount that an infant would be given, and she can't do any more. And she's like, I feel amazing when I just do this much.
Yeah.
This is what her body needs, just this little extra booster of the cofactors. This is why when it comes to buying your supplements, I highly recommend going to takeyoursupplements.com, getting a free consultation with one of our true health coaches, because the supplements that we use in our protocols are all methylated, and they're grouped together in complexes in a way that all the ratios are in balance, and they're all designed to support your liver, support your detox pathways, and support optimal health and nutrition for every single cell. And because they're dosed by body weight, you can begin slow and slowly increase and increase until you find the perfect dose for you. And the coach is there. The coach that you're assigned to will show you how to do that. Will show you how to take the supplements that are best for you and that support your body's ability to heal itself and support your liver to detoxify and your methylation pathways. It is a huge game changer. It is life changing. So go to takeyoursupplements.com, sign up for the free consultation, and give it a try. They will also show you how to get free shipping. They will show you how to fit it within your budget if you have a budget. For example, if you are in such a tight space with your money that you've less than $50, there is a plant-derived trace mineral supplement. It's a liquid. It's about $25, and then there's like tax and shipping on that. And it is life-changing. I can't tell you how many times I've had people just on that one trace mineral supplement see a huge shift in their health because we are so depleted in minerals. Now, of course, if you can't afford more, they have an amazing complex that is all vitamins and trace minerals and extract nutrients from plants and antioxidants. And it is all methylated, plant-derived. All the minerals are plant-derived, so plants have already digested the minerals so the body can absorb them. I haven't found supplements like this from any other company. I've been working with them for over 12 years with my clients and with my family and myself, getting great results. They also have a money-back guarantee. So there's nothing to lose. There's everything to gain. Go to takeyoursupplements.com. I want the listeners to have a strong grasp on this concept of epigenetics, because with genetics, we all know you're born with your eye color. That's it. We can't change your eye color. Or, you have freckles. She doesn't have freckles. This is what we're born with. That's genetics. That's baked into the cake. And then there's this epigenetics, which is super fascinating. And this world where things can be turned on and off. And you'd said before, based on for example, exposures to toxins can turn negatively impact our epigenetic expressions to turn on basically cancer. Great, we don't want that. So that's in plastics. There's so many environmental things
Yes.
that can turn on the genetic expressions for several generations. The mouse studies found 5 generations after BPA exposure, took 5 generations to correct itself, and the mice that were exposed to it ended up having, even though they ate the same food, became obese. So these are called obesogens, right? And that's so frustrating because so many people are walking around I'm doing the best I can. I'm eating super well. And why am I struggling, right? Well, do you eat out of plastic? Let's start with looking at the parabens and the bisphenol A and all those obesogens that could just be accumulatively the cumulative exposure. So clean up the toxicity in your life, in your kitchen, in your cupboards. Even drinking out of Starbucks cups, the little plastic thing on top. Just because it says BPA free doesn't mean it's the chemicals are not in it. It just means that one type of chemical. There's still 9 others that could be in there, right? And it leaches into our food, especially when the food or beverage is hot. So you have these negative epigenetic expressions we can turn on. And then you have these wonderful healthy gene expressions we can turn on by the right nutrition and bringing down toxicity. Can you educate us about that for those who this is such a new concept?
Well, I think we're starting to really understand how our bodies, our offspring, it's an adaptive process. We can see that just in, if you look at human height and different things like that. I mean, there's different aspects that things will change over generations depending on your exposures. So it's not that we haven't seen that in action. I mean, people could point to different things within cultures where things just get passed down. And so there's this idea that we have this really amazing adaptive response in our bodies. So, for example, there might be a time when we won't be able to eat gluten anymore.
Mm.
So, this was really not anything up to probably 30 years ago. I mean, I grew up eating gluten, it wasn't a problem, but like, you know, my own kids have problems with gluten. You look at these different things, whether it be the chemicals in the environment, herbicides, pesticides, and you look and it's like, well, I don't think I gave them a bad gene, but just that whole idea that, they may pass on to their own offspring the inability to eat gluten. And it's not anything that I would have given them. So there is this idea that things in our environment can change our genes so that good or bad, but so that our offspring then take on that expression, that gene expression. So that's kind of the idea of what some people call biohacking, or where you say, okay, I've identified these genes, and if I support them in an optimal way, maybe my offspring and generations to follow, it will be not as much of a problem. But the other aspect to this is that, we have seen that, certain genes will adapt because of certain environmental factors. We've seen that like in sickle cell disease, and they're more resilient. The people that have sickle cell are more resilient to malaria, for example. So we know that those type of things can also be passed on based on, those sort of environmental exposures. But the idea that we now, because the genome has been mapped and that we can identify these different genes, if we intervene on a certain level, well, we may change the dynamics of health to come. So what we do now, the choices that we make now, the different advances that we can make in our health now, and like you said, getting rid of like fragrances and things like that, so many of the chemicals that actually, like you said, turn off some of these genes. If we can eliminate some of those things in our lives that actually promote those sort of deleterious effects on our genes, then maybe in the future we have a much healthier population.
So are you saying that continuous exposures to certain things over generations, the body adapts as a theory? Did the bodies adapt based on their malaria exposure by developing sickle cell? Is that a theory?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And so, or we're seeing in the last 100 years, and this is even before genetically modified food, in the last 100 years, they changed wheat and
Yes.
and modified it, and the way they did the agriculture, the way they harvested it, and pollinized and cross pollinated, they grew wheat that contained more and more and more gluten. And so food in the last just 3 to 4 generations has a tremendous, measurably huge amount more gluten. I don't remember the exact
Yes.
number, but it was something
Yes.
crazy. It was some crazy number
Mm-hmm.
that it is increased. So we were used to, and we've always eaten ancient grains. We've always had very small amount of gluten in our diet, but now it's this very strong exposure, just like we've always had arsenic. Arsenic's been in our food, but in very, 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 very trace amounts. And if you
Yes.
concentrate it, it will kill you. And if you concentrate
Yes.
it, but not to the point where it kill you, it will poison you, and it will be like heavy metal poisoning, right? Like it can, you can live with it your whole life, live a shorter life, be chronically sick, and it not be great. So at some point, gluten, it tipped the scales, and it's now like it's a net negative, right? So small
Mm-hmm.
tiny amounts for thousands of years was fine. Then they concentrated the amount of gluten that the plant makes, and now we left with people that in Europe, it's interesting, in certain European countries they eat the bread just fine. They come to the States, they eat the bread, they get incredibly sick.
Yes.
And that's because the amount of gluten changes. But some people, I mean, some people can like concentrate gluten, like vegetarians or vegans, and in China they'll do this, and they'll take gluten and make like a meat like substance out of it. So some people eat just like concentrated gluten and they're fine, whereas other people, like your children, like my whole family, we don't respond well to it. And so are you saying that over time, because of the exposure, our epigenetics will adapt to make it so that we can't eat it anymore?
Yes. I believe that's the case. I believe that we are creating, because right now we see it really prominent in young people. Like, I'm 51, so I kind of miss that because I think some of the major herbicides and things like that, the genetically modified stuff, really, I think I missed some of that in my youth.
Mm.
But I think like my kids' generation, they're being exposed to it on every level, of different foods, even, well-made foods, not just processed foods. I mean, but there's this, I think what's happening is, yes, we're going to end up having, like, their offspring might not be able to eat any form of gluten. And I think that that's something that is starting to happen. Which is a real tragedy because, wheat has been around for, millennia, and it's actually full of really healthy B vitamins. And it's a real tragedy that, we're getting to a point where we're like allergic to wheat, because of the gluten content. But what's really interesting is you can find forms of wheat that are non-hybridized and like the ancient forms of wheat. But people who are gluten sensitive can't even have those.
Right. And we've tipped the scales too far.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we've gotten to the point where even if they eat the stuff that's been around for millennia, they can't eat it anymore because their gut has no ability to process it. And even if you take digestive enzymes, it still doesn't fix it because the inflammatory process has already set in.
Oh man, I interviewed a guy, Dr. John Douillard, and he wrote a book called Eat Wheat. And when I saw that, I was like, oh no, I'm doing an interview with a guy who's telling everyone to eat wheat. And I was like, okay, let me dig a little deeper. I'm not going to like throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it turned out it was brilliant. It was a brilliant title because what he was suggesting was that, and this was back in episode 505, he was saying this whole book actually is not just go eat wheat and that's the healthy thing for you. He's saying use food as almost like a diagnostic tool. Like there's ways to sort of measure your health, and then go eat wheat, see how you feel. Like cut wheat out for 30 days or 60 days and then eat some, for example. But using food to measure your health. And it's like, listen, if you eat wheat for that day after cutting it out for a while and you feel horrible, like you're either the next, you don't sleep well, or you're inflamed, or your joints are achy, it doesn't have to be digestive, it could be brain fog, then we need to look deeper because there's more stuff going on. But I just thought that was really interesting that we could use certain foods as a way of measuring our own health and lack thereof, and where we could strengthen our health. So here we have our genetics, which are, their genetics don't change, like eye color, hair color, that kind of thing, that you're born with. But then there's this entire beautiful world of epigenetics, which we can influence. So that gives you a bit of power, right? We can influence. So, back when I was a kid, they were talking about genetics as a standpoint of like, oh, well, but heart disease might be genetic, so you might be passed down, and that's it. Your grandpa had it, you're gonna have, or your dad had it, you're gonna have it, that kind of thing. And now we see, well, first of all, lifestyle is absolutely
Yes.
100%. If you have a really, really healthy lifestyle, doesn't matter what your genetics are, because you can intervene. But it's good to know where the weak links are in our body and our health. And then there's epigenetics, and that's something that we can actually influence and
Yes.
turn on or turn off in our lifetime. And
Yes.
that's the empowering thing. That's where we come to you and we go, okay,
Yes.
what can we do? So when someone comes to you and says, I don't want to feel sick anymore, do you do epigenetic testing? Like, how does that work?
So usually what I'll do is I kind of lay it out for people, what options that they have for testing. Some people just are not comfortable doing genetic tests, and I understand that. I mean, to each their own. I usually tell them that, having some information about genetics is a key aspect to what I do, because I use it like a roadmap to figure out what other testing might be most useful for that person. So I really try to assess right away what their comfort level is. Some people just want to do everything, and that's great. They like data, because, data is a huge part of what I do. It's like collecting data. And there's a lot of people who understand that, and they really, they want to take advantage of that. Other people are just a little bit scared of, not necessarily what they might find, but just that maybe they shouldn't be looking in those areas. And I don't know how to explain it, but everybody has their comfort level. So what I try to do is really look at their family history, and from the things that their grandparents, their parents, aunts and uncles may have dealt with, that sort of gives me a clue, because there is obviously some hereditary aspects to general health. And then once I have that, then I can kind of point them in the direction of where they may want to go. For people that are interested in the genetics, when people were first doing these tests, a lot of people were using the sort of commercially available ones, the more hereditary family ancestry and things like that. Now companies have come out where they're small companies that will, everybody has their own take on doing genetic testing. Personally, I like ones that are actionable. So it's not just enough to find out that you don't have a rare condition, right? Because most people don't have those rare conditions. Mostly genetics to me is something that needs to be actionable. How can I use this information to better myself and better my future? And is there something that I can clean up in my life that I should clean up because of my genetics? For example, just myself, I have really high cholesterol, and I figured out that I have genetics that I don't process saturated fats well. Well, I was eating a lot of dairy and, cheese. And so those were all things that I had to change, because if I didn't, I would end up with probably diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is what my grandmother had, and both of my grandmothers. It was something that I did not want to become my grandparents. So I was like, hey, I have this information. I'm going to do something about it. So I just started working on, differences in my diet. So that's where I will utilize, and I recommend genetic testing, where you can understand the nutritional aspect of your genetics, because I think that's the simplest way to really make a difference right away, as well as your long-term outcomes. And so those are what I tend to recommend. And like I said, some people want to do it, some people don't. And if they don't, I say, okay, so what we'll do is we will just do blood testing. I can, do comprehensive stool testing. I love looking at the gut. I think outside of genetics, the gut health is, well, and this is really interesting because even mainstream medicine is really picking up on this. I never forget my allopathic side, and I still like to see what, I get email blasts and things like this from the big medical societies and things like that, just to, I want to know what, the different things that are, what they're promoting. And one thing that I heard about, and I think it was just this week, it was like a trivia question. It was, where is most serotonin made? And
I know the answer.
yeah, I bet you do. And I didn't, I already knew it was in the gut, but that was the answer. It was 90% of it is made in our gut, serotonin.
Isn't that amazing?
And 10% is made in the brain. Yet, how do we address people that have mental health? Well, we try to manipulate their neurochemistry. And it's like, well, shouldn't we be manipulating our gut chemistry? And
Heck yeah.
And so that is like, that's mainstream medicine is finally picking up that, hey, our gut, that is an area that's really, really important. So really, I would probably say I try to get 100% of my patients to collect a stool sample. And I know it's not, people kind of probably raise their eyebrows, and good thing I do telemedicine, because sometimes I don't see that, right? But, but it's, it is definitely like, some people are kind of go, whoa, that seems weird. But oh my goodness, I have learned so much through just understanding people's general health through the function of their gut. And that's just something that, people are really receptive to it. Once they see that, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm like that. Those are areas I can, obviously I'm reacting to gluten. I have a gluten, antibody response. And those are things, it's like, you wouldn't believe how powerful that is to get people to stop eating gluten. At least for a temporary, at least until you can, clean up the leaky gut. And the fact that we have biomarkers to check for leaky gut, these were things we didn't even know we could test for. And in fact, the problem is the allopathic medical community doesn't even know some of these tests exist. And
they don't even believe in leaky gut. They're still going around poo-pooing it.
So the thing is, and this is just a process, the more that I think patients become aware of these things and are, doing these things, I mean, that their regular doctors are going to be exposed to this, whether they like it or not, because the patients are going to say, hey, I did this test, and so I think that the more that, I think even the patients enlighten the doctors a lot. Even with me, I listen to my patients so much, and I let them guide quite a bit of what they do. I obviously give them information, but it's a two-way street. And I think that that's what allopathic medicine has been, a very paternalistic, it's a one-sided thing, and you chastise the patient if they haven't been doing what they've needed to be doing for the last year or whatever, when you're not happy with their blood work. And that's not the right approach. The right approach is to make it a two-way street and say, hey, here's the education, here's what's going on with you, consider this like a baseline, and the choices you make are going to influence. So and I keep patients accountable by redoing some of these tests, and so that they can see, because I can only guide them. I can't be with them every day to coach them and say, you got to do this or don't do that. Give them the tools, and then they're going to make much better choices about things if they just understand the education, or if they have that educational piece and they understand the consequences of not doing those things, or the benefits of doing the things that they should be doing.
Well, they're motivated because they paid you, and they went through the process of paying for these labs, and also they came to you for a reason. They're not feeling well and they want to get better. So many people are walking around not even believing they can get better. And that's why I love doing my podcast, because my listeners are getting on a visceral level like, oh, my body can heal itself. My body was designed to constantly seek homeostasis, and I'm going to help it get there. And I got to tell you, like, the levels, it's like, okay, imagine we're climbing. I say there's no Mount Everest of health. I have this joke because I have overcome so many things in my past, so many illnesses in my past, and yet I'm still on a health journey, and I know I'm never going to be done. Like, I'm never going to reach the top and put my flag in the top of Mount Everest of health and say, I'm done. There is no getting done, but there's these peaks and valleys, and there's these plateaus. And like when I say plateau, I mean like in a good way. Like you're standing there and you're like, yay, I got to this part of the mountain, and you can look out and take observe your new level of health, and then look back down the mountain and be like, wow, I used to be down there and I'm here now. And then you go up the mountain a bit, and all of a sudden now you dip down a bit and you're like, oh, okay, this is not where I want to be. I got to keep going up. So for me, doing a self check, checking in with myself and listening to the symptoms of my body, listening to my body say, these are my energy levels, this is my brain function, this is my sleep, like just checking in. And I keep track of my cycles, my monthly cycles, and anything that would accompany that. Keep track of bowel movements and just anything out of the ordinary. Anything, just listening to my body, just tuning in, listening. The more you tune in and listen, and again, not from like the fear standpoint, but just from the thank you body. This is the language that you speak. Now, I've been trained to listen to those symptoms and help, just like you have, and help them guide us. And for someone who has no training in what these symptoms might mean, like you want to go to someone who's been trained, but like just listen to them. And the best thing to do is do a mood food journal. And not, when I say journal, I don't mean like you're writing paragraphs about what you did that day. Just very quick, write down, like, score your sleep. Score your energy level, score your mental health. I'm feeling great today, or I'm feeling super motivated. And then you could write down like, or I'm feeling miserable, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling down on myself, I have tender breasts, or I'm constipated, or I have a headache because I didn't drink enough water yesterday. Like just jot these little bullet points and write down things you put in your mouth. You don't have to measure it, but just be like, today I ate strawberries and yogurt and I had waffles or whatever. Today I went to McDonald's and ate junk food. You write it down. And over time, you can look at it and go, wow, every day I've had a headache was like, this is obvious. Oh, I have a headache because every day I drank wine the night before, right? Or like, I mean, you can look at the obvious ones. But there's some not so obvious, where I figured out that I couldn't eat eggs anymore. Eggs cause heart palpitations for me. And it was the weirdest thing. And I ended up doing a Viome test, which I had the CEO of Viome on, and one of their top scientists on in a separate interview, talking about how they do also collect stool samples. Yes. It's a home kit, right? So it's easy. It's easy. You're not scaring my audience. My listeners are like, they'll be fine. They'll go do the stool sample. It'll be fine. Yeah. And it's actually not that hard to do. It's pretty simple. Yep. And they make it super easy. And then they ended up giving you, they do over 100,000 gene expressions of your microbiome. So they're not testing your genetics. They're testing the genetics of the bacteria that live in your gut. And I cannot believe what I learned. I am blown away by how cool just that test alone. And I can imagine like the stool tests that you do, and the looking deeper into your genetic expressions based on what you eat or what you don't eat, and how that's going to shift your body and shift your genetic expressions, and looking for what kind of cofactors we can support, and like making sure that you don't have leaky gut or leaky brain. There's all kinds of cool stuff that we can look at. I love that we can take someone and help them to find what kind of diet they need. When you work with people and you're doing this testing, you do the stool testing, what's like the most important thing you make sure you look at? I know everyone's different, but like what for you is like, I really want to make sure that they're, like for me, I'm like, I want to make sure you're drinking enough water, because so many people walk around chronically dehydrated, and yet like everyone knows they should drink enough water, but no one drinks enough water unless you carry a water bottle, and I don't mean a plastic one, with you all the time. You are not fully hydrated, and or like make sure they get enough sleep. Like there are these foundations of health that like for majority of people don't take seriously, but are critical to our health. Are there some like major for you foundational things you make sure to check with everyone?
Well, I mentioned the stool test, and I think within that, leaky gut has got to be one of my favorites. And if I find it, if it's abnormal, there's a whole lot that's going to be corrected if you can correct that. Because what we understand about inflammation, once inflammation it's in the gut, if it's self-contained, you may have just gut symptoms. Once that inflammation starts leaving the confines of the intestinal system, that's when you start seeing all these other things that we wouldn't even necessarily associate with our gut. So you might see skin problems. You might see, like I said, we call it brain fog, just not thinking clearly, because once these inflammatory compounds start crossing the blood-brain barrier and start entering into our brain, we start having a lot of mental cognitive issues, and then mood issues, and of course that affects sleep. And then if you start affecting sleep, you start affecting cortisol and our adrenal health. There's sort of a cascade of things that can happen if you have leaky gut. You know what, I wouldn't say that was probably, and like I said, you could also look at like MTHFR being a foundational thing too, but there's something very dynamic about the way that our gut has this sort of barrier function. And when that barrier function breaks down, our bodies really become out of sync, whether it be hormonally or, we think that almost all chronic diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmunity is all built upon this idea that these inflammatory compounds are leaching into the rest of our body. So I think that's why I ask all my patients to do a stool test, a functional stool test. And like I said, one where I can test the leaky gut function, because that's going to be, if that's present, then that needs to be healed. And typically there's a protocol with some food eliminations and different healing factors and things like that can help. Then you start assessing, okay, what are you eating that is contributing to this? What are you doing that we can modify, and what can we do to start this healing process and then stop this outflow? Because that's basically where, if you can stop that process from leaching out into the rest of the body, that's going to make a huge difference on so many other areas, like I said, that may not even feel like it's a gut problem. And I've actually found like skin conditions are some of my favorites to deal with, because, it's one thing, like, when you're talking about things that fluctuate mood and things like that, they're all happening internally. When you have something external and you start seeing it get better, and that you can actually see, oh, I ate the wrong things. I started eating gluten again. There goes my acne. When things are on the outside, it's like you pay attention to them a lot more. And so again, people can sort of be accountable, especially when they see those things. But yes, that leaky gut concept is, and for me, it's been, I've been doing this a long time, seeing patients and working with chronic illnesses. I think the prominence of the gut health and this permeability issue that we call leaky gut, that is becoming one of my go-to prominent factors. If that can be fixed, a lot of other things can be fixed.
So that's one of your foundation things. Mm-hmm. So like I'm like water, sleep, those are, for me, it's like I could give you supplements up the wazoo, but if you're dehydrated and not sleeping, like if you're choosing, like there's one thing if you like choose to go to bed at 9:30 at night and you have poor sleep, but if you choose to go to bed at 1 a.m, then it's like you've got to choose to go to bed on time. So these are foundation things, and it's as so many people just disregard it because it's like whatever, I want to stay up and Netflix and chill or whatever. I just I don't like drinking water, like whatever their excuse is. There's no amount of drugs or supplements or natural remedies that are going to get you to optimal health, because the body doesn't function on poor sleep and dehydration. So once we cover those foundation things, and there's definitely a few other foundation things. It's like, if you don't have this sort of like, if you don't have gasoline in the car, I don't care if your car is $1 million, $1 million car or a $30,000 car. It's like, if there's not gas in it, it's not going. And same with your body. So there's foundational stuff. And then that next level is foundational, like functional testing. Like everyone, we got to check everyone for this because it's so prevalent. I know that they say almost 50% of the population, just depending on ancestry, has MTHFR to some degree. And that's something that like everyone really should know about themselves, right? It's
Yes.
we're in this day and age. We can get the testing, and
Yes.
it makes such a huge difference. Can you explain what MTHFR is? What is this process of methylation, and why we should know if our body has trouble with methylating, and what that all means?
Yes. Now, you even mentioned it. You've heard it's about half the population. I've even heard it might be even up to 80%. But again, that
Wow.
might be epigenetics, right? That our
Yeah.
genetics may actually be getting worse over time,
Mm-hmm.
where more and more people are having mutations in this gene. But what it really is MTHFR gene as an enzyme is a protein, and it utilizes certain nutritional cofactors to basically do this methylation function in our body, which is in has many different categories of what it's involved in. So it's involved in DNA repair. We can actually repair our DNA. And when it doesn't repair, that's when things break down and people get cancers. So we have this ability through methylation to actually repair our DNA, so that we keep things like cancer away. And so mutations in methylation would facilitate a problem in trying to do that repair. It's also important in detoxification. So through our liver, our kidneys, elsewhere in our body, and that's because compounds, the one of the end products of methylation is called glutathione, and glutathione is one of our most important antioxidants in the body. And if you don't have enough of that, you're going to have problems getting rid of toxins in your body. Like you said, there's a whole host of environmental toxins that we're exposed to, whether, it's in the foods or the air, or even like molds, for example. These are things that we utilize methylation to eliminate. We have great resilience in our bodies up to a point, and the more that there's a problem with this methylation, the more that this is going to be impaired. It also is important in turning on and off other genes. So we have a checks and balances system in our body using methylation, so that, we don't let things go unchecked. And so we have different pathways that we have to be able to control. And methylation is one of the ways we do that, is just that whole checks and balances. It also is involved in neurotransmitter synthesis. So making things like dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine and serotonin. We use methylation and these compounds to make these very important neurotransmitters that run most of our cognitive processes, but also functions in controlling our blood pressure, for example. So that is all part of methylation as well. And it's also an important part of our immune system. And that might be from making different immune types of cells, but also with that antioxidant glutathione, that's a big part of our immunity and being able to eliminate different pathogens and things. So really, that's why it is considered a foundational part, because it just involves so many of these different aspects. And I didn't even mention the hormones. It's not that it's involved in hormone synthesis, but it can affect it based upon, if, for example, your liver's not working really well because maybe it's got a lot of toxins and you're not eliminating, well, you also break down your estrogens there. So what we find is that if your methylation process is impaired in your liver, you will find that you'll become estrogen dominant, which is not just a problem with women. Men also have problems with estrogen dominance, especially now with plastics, because they are estrogen mimickers. And so you get this buildup within the liver of these estrogenic compounds, and you're not eliminating them properly, and then that leads to a whole host of other types of problems. Some women, it might be PMS, it might be different types of cancers, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. It could just be, we know it can put strains on other hormone systems. So, for example, the adrenals and the thyroid. So there's this massive interplay that happens because of what's happening at the core process that we call methylation.
Methylation, can you explain? So I understand that like there's an amino acid that we eat, methionine, maybe you could say it.
Methionine.
Methionine, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that our body makes homocysteine from that as well, and that then our body adds it, like grabs those molecules and adds it to something. So serotonin, it adds that to the serotonin, then it becomes melatonin. So the body's converting serotonin to melatonin, which everyone thought melatonin is just for sleep, but actually only about 10% is used for sleep. The rest is used as a cellular detoxifier
Mm-hmm.
while we sleep. And so it's really important to not disrupt melatonin production, which is where like sleep hygiene comes in, but also go to the gut and make sure we're
Mm-hmm.
not disrupting serotonin production. So again, comes back to the gut, right? And we've got to go back to the foundations of our health and see, if you're not sleeping well, it's like, well, could it be in the gut? could it be in our
Yes.
methylation? Like, could it,
Yes.
like, it could just be the fact that you're, staying up too late, staring at screens and drinking coffee late at night. It could be
Right.
absolute 100% lifestyle, but it also could be, we could like geek out on your labs and see what's going on. So could you explain, so we understand this idea of methylation, like it grabs this molecule and attaches it, and that's methylation. And then people with MTHFR like have a problem with that, so everything kind of gets backed up in the system. Like, I want to understand. I want everyone to understand this more and why it's such a important thing, of one of the many things that we could have tested, just so we know more about ourselves, and we know, then we could take information like from you
Mm-hmm.
to help us understand how we could eat and not eat, and the nutrition we should take in and maybe limit, to best support our ability to methylate and detoxify.
So, one of the most important things that I try to teach patients, and this is if they know their MTHFR status, okay? Because it depends on whether they want to know that gene or not. But once you know that you have an abnormality in that gene, it's important the type of B vitamins that you get. So, what it is methylation is a process. It's methyl donations. So you have a methyl group is a carbon atom attached to 3 hydrogen atoms. Okay, and this certain compounds become what we call methyl donors. So they donate this methyl group to another compound, and it turns into something else. And it's this process of putting on the methyl group, taking off the methyl group. That's methylation. It's at its very, bringing down that science to that level. One of the most important methyl donors, we think of, methylfolate. So we think of the folic acid in the body is a B vitamin. And that is very important for the process of this methionine, homocysteine. I think of it like a cycle. And in order to have a balance in this cycle, you have to have the presence of methylated folate. And what happens is, if you have a mutation in MTHFR, you can't methylate folic acid. Now, if you have a diet full of green leafy vegetables, you are getting natural folate. Okay, you've already, that natural folate is already in that sort of methylated useful version. But say, for example, you eat a slice of bread, and that bread is fortified with B vitamins. Now, fortified grains, they put folic acid in it. Synthetic folic acid is not methylated. So if you're eating foods that are fortified, and they have fortified a lot of different things now, it's not just wheat, okay? And so if you eat folic acid, it is so strong that it is more strongly bound to our receptors, because when we eat these things, then we absorb it, and then it goes to find a cell, and that folic acid needs to enter the cell. Well, folic acid can block the receptor. And because it's stronger than the natural folate. So even if you eat a lot of green leafy vegetables, it'll be blocked out if you had a sandwich, for example, and it had folic acid in it, even if you had lettuce on it and you or some green leafy lettuce and you had natural folate, you're not going to absorb the natural folate. So that's why one of the paramount things that I tell people to do is get rid of folic acid. And that's in a lot of supplements too. So that's why it's really important to know what supplements you're taking in, because you may actually be harming yourself by blocking out, by basically that folic acid, which is so strong, that synthetic version, so strong that it's going to block the absorption of the natural folate. And then you get these problems with DNA repair because you're not getting the folate. So that's the diet and supplements are really critical once you understand what MTHFR does and why you have to be careful about putting certain compounds into your body that are going to negate the effects of other good things that you're doing.
What about cobalamin versus methylcobalamin? So B12, getting a methylated version of B12 versus, I don't know what's the difference between cobalamin? Does cobalamin exist in nature, or is that again just like folic acid is synthetic?
Yeah. So yeah, cobalamin, it refers to the basic core compound chemical, and there's different forms of cobalamin. So the most common form that you would see when you pick up a B12 supplement is cyanocobalamin, which, as the name, it's cyanide. It's a cyanide molecule. So it's probably not, the small amounts probably don't help people unless you can't detoxify very well. Now, that form of cobalamin is not in its methylated version. So the idea is if you get methylated vitamins, you bypass the methylation process so that you don't then depend on these faulty genes. You're automatically already getting the form of those vitamins that your body can't do. You can't. So if you didn't have an MTHFR mutation and you took cyanocobalamin, you would be able to get methyl groups donated to that, and you would be able to utilize that B12. Obviously, there's an argument about the other components of that cyanocobalamin that are not good, but you could do it. But there are other forms of cobalamin. There's one called hydroxylated cobalamin, and there's an adenosyl cobalamin, and they all have like slightly different functions. Like adenosyl cobalamin is often used for like mitochondrial support, which is the energy producers of our cells. And so you can really tailor the different types of B12, but the methylated cobalamin is going to be your powerhouse, B12 option, because again, that's already got the methyl group on it. So it's already going to be able to do its function in the body. So that's the real core important part about the MTHFR, is being able to methylate these compounds, folic acid, B12. But if you have a dysfunctional gene, you really need to take that in those already methylated versions.
In my mind, I'm seeing like IKEA furniture coming into the body every day, and it's like we have to. It's like if you're taking the cheaper supplements or the ones that aren't methylated or the synthetic ones, your body has to then do a process. It has to build something. So it's like the IKEA furniture comes in, and you have to build the table. It's like here's the building blocks. So your body has to add, has to take a methyl group, a donated methyl group, add it to build it. Now it has the table. Yes. Whereas when we don't have MTHFR, it's as if we've been giving IKEA furniture, but we're missing a piece.
Yes. I mean, that's a very good analogy, because it really is. It's basically making it easier for your body to utilize those nutrients without having to go through all these steps. In order to be able to utilize those nutrients. But that also, it's a two-edged sword, because if you have a lot of toxins built up in your system and all of a sudden you start taking these methylated B vitamins, you're going to start mobilizing those toxins. And that's something that's why there's sort of a, start low, go slow type of thing, because people don't know how toxic they are.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things, is like we're all carrying around a certain burden of toxins, some more than others. But once you start like mobilizing those toxins, it can make you feel sicker. And
Yeah.
so we're in the early phases of this. It's really important to use lower dosages and to be gentle with it, because not everybody has the best outlet of their detoxification process. And again, that's why the gut is such an important part of this, because that's a big area of waste elimination, right? So in order for you to eliminate toxins, you need to have a healthy gut where you
Mm-hmm.
have that ability to eliminate. So that's why, sometimes giving people methylated, they want to focus on the MTHFR. But if you don't have a healthy gut system, you're going to mobilize these toxins and you're going to feel very, very sick if you do not have a way to eliminate, especially like people who are constipated. Oh my goodness. Those folks have a really, really rough time taking B vitamin or the methylated B vitamins, because they're mobilizing these toxins. They become like toxic overloaded, and it begins to make them feel very, very sick. So that's why, there is definitely a process of depending, of course, upon, each individual and how sick they are to begin with, especially if someone comes in and they're pretty sick to begin with. Those are people you have to be very gentle with.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Start slow. And
Mm-hmm.
also the testing up front really helps,
It does.
because then you know how their body is going to process stuff or not process stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a bit about like these artificial things, like if we took supplements that were like lower quality, and that's something that can block methylation, or that it just kind of gums up the works because our body cannot methylate these things.
It will definitely block the absorption of the necessary like active vitamins. Like you
Right.
won't be able to take up these compounds. It would literally block
So
those cellular
take
receptors.
this is incredible, because taking folic acid, which is
Mm-hmm.
what all mothers are told while they're
Mm-hmm.
pregnant to
Mm-hmm.
take
Yep.
to prevent neurotube defects.
Yes.
And we all think neurotube defects, like where the spinal cord is sticking out of the back, God forbid, right? Like where the back, the spine is not made properly in utero, and now part of the spine is bulging, and that's major. And then there's minor ones like cleft palate, like cleft lip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
we can go even further now, because it's so common. And I think in part because so many people have MTHFR, and so many prenatals have the artificial synthetic folic acid, which what you just shared, it blocks the
Yes.
ability for people with MTHFR, blocks the ability to absorb and uptake and utilize folate, thus potentially causing, which we know it causes, if you have a folate deficiency, your baby is not being built properly. And what we
Yes.
see is now a huge uprise in tongue ties and lip ties,
Mm-hmm.
and that is believed to be part of the folic acid blocking folate, right?
Yes.
And we just kind of like, oh, no big deal, let's just go clip their tongue tie, clip their lip. But that's something on the outside, but what happened on the inside? There could be other things going on the inside, just like you talked about. Skin conditions are so fun to help people heal, but if you've got rashes on the outside and scaly skin and itchy, inflamed, and you've got this stuff on the outside, we have skin on the inside of our body. It's like
Mm-hmm.
think about all the other parts of our body on the
Yes.
inside where the same kind of tissue. If you are on fire on the outside, imagine what's going on the inside.
Oh, yes. Yes. If you see it externalized, you know that there's a war going on inside for sure.
Right. So we have this really huge juggernaut
Mm-hmm.
of a problem where the supplements that women are being given to prevent problems actually can contribute to causing them, because the women,
Yeah.
a large majority of our population has MTHFR issues, and then we've got on top of this synthetic supplements. And now some of my listeners, I'm sure, are saying, well, I'm just not going to take supplements, then I can avoid this problem. Is that the answer?
Does not taking supplements? No, because again, it depends on your diet, a big part of that. Because remember, especially if you're eating fortified grains, you're going to be getting that folic acid. It's like you're taking supplements and you didn't even know it.
Ah,
And
yes.
and you know that's part of the inherent problem is that fortification wasn't we didn't always have that. That's also kind of newer and relatively and so it's important for people to realize that yes, if you do have these deficits, depending on what your diet is, and I would say most people probably don't get a healthy amount of greens in their diet. And there's complications with that too. Some people get kidney stones. They can't have high oxalate foods, for example. So, they do have to limit some of their green leafy vegetables. So sometimes supplements just become a necessity because you've eliminated so many things out of your diet. For example, if we were talking about wheat, how that taking wheat out of people's diet actually eliminated a lot of the B vitamins that were in it. So you have to supplement those B vitamins. Or if you're vegetarian, it's very hard to get adequate amounts of vitamin B12. So, it really, the diet is very critical in determining how many supplements you need, but that's where the blood work helps because so one of the biomarkers, you had mentioned it earlier with the methylation process, is homocysteine. And homocysteine, as well as glutathione, even methionine, all these things can be measured. But homocysteine ends up being a great biomarker in the blood for determining your methylation status. So, and essentially with folks that have higher homocysteine levels, they're going to need more supplements in the form of these methylated B vitamins. And so, the amount of supplements that you need really needs to be tailored, and that's where the testing can help determine what those needs are. So the answer is not giving up all your supplements, but the answer is doing smart supplementation. And we've gotten to a point where there's no excuse for not having smart supplementation because we have so many tests that can help guide that.
Uh, and also, it's not just about your genetics. It can be about the genetics of your gut. Talking
Mm-hmm.
about the high oxalates, it's really interesting that there you can help support your gut health and build up a healthy microbiome. There are certain microbiome bacteria that actually help our body process the greens in such a way that we don't develop kidney stones. I happen to have that. I happen to have that. I'm so proud of myself because I can eat 12 pounds of spinach a day and I will never, ever, ever get kidney stones because I am one of those people that have absolutely no problem with processing it. But it's not my genetics.
Mm-hmm.
It's my gut microbiome. So the cool thing is the more you
Yes.
work on your gut health, the more little
Yes.
rewards you get. Like it's kind of like if you've ever played video games, it's like getting these little achievements. This little achievement comes up and
Mm-hmm.
pops up. And for me, when you build your gut health, it's like you're achieving because you grow a robust microbiome. So let's say right now you only have 1,000 different types of bacteria in your gut. But as you build a healthy microbiome and focus on your gut health, you could build it to 10,000, right? You could have a
Yes.
variety that's really robust. And then you get all these little achievements because the new bacteria, the new healthy bacteria come in and they'll help digest your food and make compounds for you. And so just imagine all these little achievements popping up like, oh, you got the gut bacteria
Yes.
that makes it so that you're skinny.
Well, so that's the beauty of the testing. It has gotten, it's amazing the research that they've done to make the tests so that we can identify these areas. So, one of my favorite tests is called the GI map test. That's the functional GI evaluation stool test. And they measure some very key, what they call commensal bacteria. Commensals are your keystone, your foundational bacteria. And the science has gotten so good in this area where we can actually identify if you don't have enough of certain bacteria, the commensal bacteria, it will set you up for things like leaky gut. So
Mm.
we are really getting to the point where we can actually, you can take supplements of certain targeted probiotics. And it's so funny because people go and they'll buy, any probiotic, oh, acidophilus, I heard that's a good one, right? Well, some people have plenty of lactobacillus, which is in the acidophilus lactobacillus family. They don't need that. But what they are lacking are some of these other lesser known commensals, which, some of them provide the mucin layer, which is
Mm-hmm.
really critical as a barrier for, preventing leaky gut. There's other ones that produce short chain fatty acids. It takes the carbohydrates, the vegetables and fruits that we eat, and these bacteria convert these compounds into making these other compounds called short chain fatty acids, which are real key for keeping our colonocytes, basically our intestinal cells, like tight and not leaky, and creating this healthy barrier with a healthy immune system. And so we've gotten to the point where we can actually target these very specific areas, and it makes a profound difference in all the things down the way. And the fact that we have access to that now is just really, I think it lends itself to a whole new future of what we consider health and preventative medicine, and restoring function that we've lost or that we've damaged through. So even though we can't necessarily control the toxins, or I mean, we can control to some degree, but some things we just can't. And in that, if we can make ourselves more resilient through optimization of our microbiome and taking tailored, appropriate supplements, we become much less vulnerable to these things that we cannot control.
Love it. I mean, we could talk all day. We could keep going and chat all day, because I'm so fascinated to learn more and more and more about, I mean, just MTHFR is just the beginning. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
other epigenetic factors to dive in, but that, because it's so popular, like you said, it could be 80% of the population. It's definitely over
Mm-hmm.
50%.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so common, and it's becoming more and more common. And we need to look at, which is so interesting, how we've changed our food, right? Because when I was a kid, the cereal aisle looked a lot different than it does now. Let's just put it that way. Like, we have in one generation changed our food so much. We're eating most of our food from factories. And
Mm-hmm.
when you look at, I had a doctor on talking about how over 80% of a child's diet is processed food.
Yeah.
Over
Yeah.
80%. There's some children who don't eat any actual food. It's 100% from,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like Go-Gurt and chicken nuggets and,
Oh yeah.
Kraft dinner or whatever. It's just, it's it children are being fed so much of this, which is processed and fortified with substandard, the lowest quality synthetic B vitamins.
Yep.
And we see MTHFR on the rise, and we're wondering, gee, could it be because we have messed with nature, right? We've messed with our diet
Yes.
so severely. We made it so man-made, so artificial, right?
Oh
In
yeah.
one generation, it's just pretty bizarre. And now our bodies are adapting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
revolting in a sense.
Yep.
Um, but this affects every area of our life. This affects the brain health, affects our gut health, affects, like you've even said, our skin. It can affect hormones, everything. So we got to come back to, and we see children who are eating this way, and then they have developmental issues, and they're put on like Ritalin or something, and they're diagnosed. And I've seen children who appear as if they are on a spectrum, let's say ADHD or autism. They're on some spectrum, and then they're given very clean, healthy food, the right supplements. They're with through holistic medicine, and a few months later, they are no longer displaying any of those symptoms. So my question is, was that diagnosis correct? Are they actually someone who is ADHD or is autistic? Or is it that humans will express different symptoms when their body is pushed into this toxic way?
Well, I think that was a perfect example. Because I actually talked to a lot of parents of children who have been diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm like, they should probably have some genetic testing done, because my guess is they might have an MTHFR gene mutation, and they're eating processed foods and they're eating folic acid, and that's probably creating imbalance within the neurotransmitter synthesis system. So they're getting these sort of erratic, just like you were talking about irritability when you took too many B vitamins. Well, the same process can happen in kids, whether it be dyes, yellow dyes or whatever. These things all promote sort of this aberrant, imbalanced methylation process. And so they end up diagnosed with these mental conditions that are actually brought on by the fact that they are being bombarded with these chemicals, including what they would think of as synthetic vitamins that are okay to take, but they're not. In some people, they're very, very sensitive. And that's why, I still can't believe we still put food dyes in things, because those and there are genetics that you can analyze that actually, where some people, I actually have that. I have a sensitivity to yellow food dye, and ADHD diagnoses are much higher in people with yellow food dye sensitivities. So when you're eating things like a Cheeto, it's no wonder that you would, have some sort of, not only are you not getting any real nutrition out of that, but you're bombarding yourself with, food dyes as well as synthetic folic acid.
Yeah, and excitotoxins. It's
Yeah.
is not healthy for the brain. Is absolutely not healthy for brain. But we feed them junk. We feed children junk and then put them on a drug. And it's so sad. It's so sad, because and the whole mainstream says this is okay. There's known carcinogens that are acceptable on our shelves in food, in our grocery stores in America. So really, we need to stop trusting. That my first step is stop trusting. Because as children, we watch like Kellogg's, for example. Oh, Tony the Tiger or whatever. We saw Fruit Loops. We see this cute little cartoon. We have at McDonald's. Oh, Ronald McDonald. Oh, look at him. I love him so much. I'm a kid being brought up with all these commercials. And then, they were smart. They knew what they were doing, because they had programmed children to build such a deep inherent trust of their General Mills, right? Of whatever company was, Nestle, right? And then you're 20 years old walking through the aisles of your grocery store buying your own food, and you look up and you get you're anchored into these good emotions for Tony the Tiger and General Mills and all these companies that do not have your best interests at heart. They are beholden to the shareholders and the profits, and they need to buy the cheapest ingredients absolutely possible, and then they need to figure out how to make it be so addictive that you'll keep eating it. And it's not for our best interest, but we have been programmed to trust and love these companies. And so anytime you buy something from a box, it comes from a factory, we need to question. We need to question what's in it.
Yeah.
Understand, reading labels, understand what's in it. So fascinating that these things block, like what's put in our food is blocking our ability to detoxify, and also blocking nutrients from coming in and making us further nutrient deficient. And again, we could talk for hours. It's been so great having you on the show. I want to make sure listeners know that they can go to your website. You do telemedicine consultations, so you work with people like all around the world. How does that work to work with you?
Well, there is regulations within the licensure. So I can only, right now I'm only licensed in the states of California and Washington. So I have to restrict my appointments, and I use like Zoom or FaceTime for video when people would like video with the audio, which is I wish I could expand to other states. It was nice during the COVID pandemic because they kind of opened up, loosened a lot of the restrictions, and telemedicine really grew during that time. But unfortunately, that's ended. So
That's so silly.
so patients have to be physically within the state. So like if you were to travel to Washington State or California, I could have an appointment. So it's a really weird thing.
That's weird.
I
Yeah.
know,
Can you
but
not, can someone hire you on a different capacity? Like instead of a patient doctor relationship, could they hire you to consult them and to like just answer your questions, but not as a
that's
doctor? Not
yeah.
as
I
their
mean, that's
doctor, I should say.
yeah. That I haven't really explored that. That has been something I've been kind of looking into because obviously once you establish a doctor-patient relationship, then you really are under the confines of the licensure
Sure.
status. But yeah, I'm exploring different things like that. And also, many states actually, if you have a practitioner, even a chiropractor or anybody that is willing or able, because a lot of states are allowing like even alternative practitioners to order testing and things like that. Not just naturopaths, but other providers as well. And so if you have a provider in a state that is not Washington or California, I can work with them, like kind of guide them. And so that's an option for a lot of people in other states, if they just have a practitioner that's willing to work with me. So I wouldn't be able to order the testing per se, but I could help with the interpretation of it.
Got it. So if they're working with a chiropractor or osteopath or naturopath or any kind of doctor that
Yeah.
ordered the labs, then they could bring could they bring the labs to you and you could talk to them about it, or would you have to like the go-between is their practitioner?
I think the practitioner might have to be like present on some level.
Yeah.
Whether they were at the office or something with them. But yeah, I think that's kind of the restriction because it's the states all have their own laws around those things.
Right.
And so yeah, I think there has to be them present. But like I said, I'm trying to explore other things. And, some of the states actually do have, because the licensure process is very, very daunting. To get licensed in all 50 states is just impossible. It would be very expensive too. But some of the states, actually, a lot of the states are allowing sort of a limited license so that you could practice telemedicine in that state without having to get a full license. So those are things that I'm also exploring because I've had to turn away a number of people that, that would love to just, get this testing done. They just don't have anybody
Yeah.
that can interpret it for them. So I am doing that process. But like I said, in the meantime, people can take a trip to California or Washington and as long as they're physically in the States, then I can do the
Got it.
appointment.
And regardless where someone is, they should reach out to you anyway, just in case, because by the time they've heard this, maybe you have discovered a different avenue of how you can best support people. And
Yes.
I just wonder if there's a way, maybe look into this, if there's a way that you can, not as their doctor, but it's just as a consultant to consult, to answer general questions around something or help someone like point them in the right direction, help them at least decide what labs that they should go do with their chiropractor or whatever. But someone who's like they're stuck. They're like, I'm stuck. I've gone this far. I'm kind of at a loss. And maybe like you could be hired as a consultant to do like little detective work with them. I wonder if that's a possibility because I've seen so many doctors that do, and maybe they're just breaking the rules or
Well, and I think that there is probably a lot of that. It's very hard to really police a lot of that, but
Right. But you're not going to come on
it,
air and admit
no.
to like openly admit to breaking your
No,
licensure.
exactly. No way. But yes, I think, like I said, I am exploring other things because I feel like there is a real deficit. There's a hunger for this knowledge. People really are interested in knowing about it and like what direction to go, and I want to be able to provide that in whatever way makes sense for everybody involved, and so I am exploring that. So
Cool. Well, then listeners should check your website out. I'm going to
yes,
have the link in the show notes of today's podcast at learntourhealth.com so they can go to it. And here's the link. It is yournamemd.com. So LaurieMartimd.com. Just want to make sure that in case someone's
yes,
listening and they're driving or something, just go to learntourhealth.com where the show notes are and check out all the information there. Dr. Laurie, it's been so great having you on the show and having this conversation. I think it's really important, our mindset and knowing, first of all, our mindset, and then knowing that there's a path, knowing there's a way, that people who have fibromyalgia no longer have to have it. Like it's for some people, they've been told you're just going to have it your whole life. You can get to the point where you're no longer in chronic pain. Like Lyme, I know people who've completely 100% reversed all symptoms of Lyme and no longer have those co-infections, and they're feeling amazing. They went from like being bedridden to like just running marathons. Like we can overcome, the body can overcome. And the cool thing is that there's stuff that like Dr. Laurie does, able to help us figure it out, get to the root cause, look at our epigenetics, uncover what's going on, make sure we're giving ourselves the right nutrition, that there's a game plan. And we got to make sure we're taking ourselves to the right doctor, and always, always, always believe your body wants to heal itself and can heal itself. We just have to learn what to give our body to help our body heal itself. And that's why functional medicine doctors are so important, because they're here to help us figure that out. And I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for everything you do. And is there anything you want to say to wrap up today's interview? I know you've said so much, but is there anything that we left unsaid or you want to make sure that you say before we wrap up today's interview?
well, I did want to reiterate. I don't want to discourage people that aren't in California or Washington. I do have a contact. Just contact me on my website. Just send me an email, and like I said, if you're not in Washington or California, just send me an email. Kind of explain your situation, and I will look into what options that might be possible. I'll look into it. So just don't be discouraged if you're not from one of those states, because I'm really working on trying to expand to help as many people as I feasibly can, because I think we're under a lot of assault in our world, and we need to be more resilient. And I think just understanding, having some education in this space is so empowering to every individual. And I think, if you're interested in exploring those things, I will do my best to try to help.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel like it's so empowering and enlightening for those to know that there are these avenues, there's these pathways, and it's worth diving in and exploring, because it can be for so many people life-changing.
Yes, I agree. Thank you again for having me.
These are the same supplements that I have been using myself personally, my family, and my clients for the last 12 and a half years. These are the same supplements that helped me to overcome my chronic diseases. I used to have type 2 diabetes, chronic adrenal fatigue, chronic infections, polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility, and I don't have any of those things anymore. The holistic doctors that informed these supplements discovered that the root cause of disease is a lack of key nutrients. There are 90 essential nutrients the body needs, and we're not getting them from our food anymore because of the farming practices of the last 100 years. So no matter how healthy we eat, we're still missing what our body needs to create optimal health. Because you listen to this health podcast and you're looking for health solutions, you will love working with the team at takeyoursupplements.com. These are health coaches that just like me, overcame their own health issues using, of course, eating healthy lifestyle. But the key fundamental thing that they added were these supplements. These supplements encompass all 90 essential nutrients. And when you talk to your health coach, they will help to customize a plan specifically to your needs and your health goals. You will start feeling amazing right away. Within the first month of taking these supplements, everyone notices better sleep, more mental clarity, better energy, overall sense of well-being that takes over their life. And they are so happy that they got on these supplements. I want you to give it a try. There's a money-back guarantee. And there's amazing health coaches waiting to help you at takeyoursupplements.com. And it's free to talk to them. So what are you waiting for? Go to takeyoursupplements.com right now. Sign up for a free consultation. And in a month, you could be feeling on top of the world, just like I did. I was so sick. I felt so horrible. And I overcame that. I had to obviously make healthy choices around every area of my life. I had to change my diet. I had to change my lifestyle. But I needed to fill in those nutrient gaps. And that's where Take Your Supplements comes in. They help you to make sure that you're getting all 90 essential nutrients. So your cell, every cell in your body, all 37.2 trillion cells in your body will be bathed in all the nutrients that they need so that you can live an optimal life full of health and vitality at any age. Go to takeyoursupplements.com and talk to one of them. Today, they can help you right now to begin to make that health transformation. That's takeyoursupplements.com.